Welcome to Fabulously Flawed with your host, Marni, where Mondays mean motivation, and by Wednesday, we're dishing out dazzling advice with a Newsweek twist. This is your go-to spot for embracing the mess, celebrating the successes, and never letting anyone dull your sparkle. Join us for laughs, life lessons, and a whole lot of fun. Fabulously Flawed, where perfect is overrated and every flaw is fabulous.
Hey, Fabulously Flawed friends, Fabulously Flawed listeners. I am your host, Marni, and always thank you for joining me on my Newsweek Wednesday. If you're a new listener, what is Newsweek Wednesday? I have the pinch me moment of being an opinion piece writer for Newsweek. They have, yes, Newsweek. I know, I say this to myself all the time, like Newsweek. They have different what should I do situations, family and parenting, relationships. So different across the board scenarios that emotions we all feel universally. Of course, the situations are different, but every Wednesday I'm going to read one of the articles that I wrote my opinion piece for and why I wrote what I did. So this one's kind of interesting, and I think it could be somewhat relatable across the board. Again, just family dynamics and everything else. So this was in a post shared on Reddit, Am I the Asshole? Under the username of whatever she was. She explained her son's daughter, Lindsay, has always looked very different to her other siblings, but they never made a big deal of it. I truly was confused about how she had blonde curly hair while the rest of the family has dark hair. I thought it was genetics being weird, and I love her. The issue came up when Lindsay told me her parents banned her from getting an ancestry test. I told my son and daughter-in-law that if there was something fishy around her birth, she needs to know. They denied it and told me to leave it alone. That's when the 15-year-old went to her biology teacher, who, according to the poster, said it was quite odd for her to have some traits that her family doesn't have. She came to me distressed, asking me to buy a DNA test since she needs to know. Long story short, she is not her mother's kid. My son got someone else pregnant, and her biological mother gave her up. Now, they said this has blown up the family while Lindsay is pissed about being lied to. I'm getting a ton of heat and from getting her a DNA test. Now they won't talk to me, which is making Lindsay even more mad at them. Marni Goldman, that's me, empowerment coach and author of True to Myself, Peace, Love, Marni. Oh, I love that. She told Newsweek that no good deed goes unpunished. I said, unfortunately, the grandmother was the recipient here. There is no crime supporting and having a bond with your granddaughter. Love is wanting to help each other, not hurt each other. There is a much bigger picture here, the mental well-being of a 15-year-old girl. This is a complex and emotional situation. Discovering something so significant about your identity and dealing with the horrifying reactions of your family members at the same time can be very challenging. It's kind of gaslighting, too. This is a major revelation, and it's normal to feel a broad range of emotions like confusion, anger, sadness, or even relief at finally knowing. Seeking help is crucial for healing. To make matters worse, she's forbidden to see her grandmother, her one true ally. According to Goldman, that's me, depriving a child of a relative is cruel, and forbidding her to do ancestry only made her more inquisitive. It's human nature. As it played out, clearly it backfired on the parents. The biggest and most disturbing question here is why the father isn't acknowledging the lies, the deceit, and his affair. Being mad at his mother is just his way of shifting blame and playing the victim. The father needs to put on his big boy pants and take accountability for his actions. He would rather throw his mother under the bus and hurt his daughter tremendously, all because he couldn't man up to the truth. The grandmother and her granddaughter have a wonderful relationship that should not be dissolved or tarnished. They need each other. They seem to be the only two rational ones in the family. So I don't know if anyone can relate. I can on a few different levels with this. Personally, my father, I found out, was not my biological father. I found out at a very young age. I couldn't even imagine if I found out at 15. A part of your self-identity and wanting to know where you come from, it's something that it's inhumane to deprive somebody of that. And the father, I'm going to say it, he's a friggin' pussy, because why he just doesn't say, this is what happened, this is our situation, I pray that your family has been healthy. And even though a mom is not somebody who just gives birth, who raises. So I don't know how the relationship was with the mother and her daughter. Doesn't seem to be very connected in this situation. If they were super close, possibly this girl would have known. But one, depriving a child of a relative, it's so wrong. Your issues with one person should not have any kind of infliction on a child that has a loving relative wanting to be there, and out of your own anger and childish behaviors, depriving a child of a relative, like I said, is cruel. My husband and I met. Part of this story is somewhat eerily familiar. We had an affair and I got pregnant, and I had my daughter who has blue eyes, and my husband and I were married now, both have brown eyes. And there was a lot of crazy question about it, which makes sense because of our situation. But the thought of my daughter not knowing, I mean, you have to know where you come from. But also in that same sentence, his ex-wife, the fact that we were married, they had a daughter already who was 5 years older than Taylor, my daughter, and she refused her daughter Ashley to ever see her father. So whether it's a relative like a dad, now my husband was the hands-on dad. He was the daddy that picked her up from school. Daddy did everything. She just projected her anger on her daughter. And since she's 10 years old, who's now going to be 30, wasted all these years projecting her own anger rather than saying, you know what? It's your dad. So if somebody is a good parent, a good relative, a good grandparent, I don't speak to my mother. I don't speak to her, but I would never deprive my children of their grandmother. One thing has nothing to do with the other. Now, if the relative isn't kind, that's one thing. But my mother truly loves my children like her children. She didn't love me, but she loves my children, and I could never imagine them not having their grandmother. So you need, whoever is listening, and if you want to punish a relative, don't use it at your child's expense. It's wrong. Figure out some way to heal yourself. But when you use somebody else as a weapon, that's putting them in the emotional line of fire and blowing them up unfairly. It's not nice. Don't deprive anybody of relatives if they are willing, kind, and loving. And don't lie, because murder will out. Everything always comes to fruition, whether it's a month, a day, a year, 10 years, 20 years. The truth always comes out, and it's so much easier to tell the truth than the lie. The truth could be something so minute, but the lie is so disrespectful. And telling also your children they're forbidden to do something, I mean, come on, that's not really, unless you're saying you're forbidden to go into that neighborhood because there's crime. But this was not a healthy way for a family to communicate about this situation. So I hope that Lindsay and her grandmother are at peace. And I hope if anybody's listening and you might, out of anger and justifiable anger, but don't use children and deprive them of relatives to settle your own internal issues. It's not fair. It is so not fair. And believe me, I have every reason not to talk to my mother, but I would never have deprived my children of that relationship. It's needed. I was never given parents. I was never given healthy grandparents. I don't have cousins, aunts. I don't have anything. So I can only imagine what it's like to have loving relatives. So please don't deprive a child of any kind of relatives or love they could be given, because without it, it doesn't hurt you guys as grown-ups. It hurts us as children, and we take it into our adult lives. So I'm going to leave it on that. Thank you for listening to another Newsweek. I have 60 of them so far, so I think I'm pretty good for the year. I want everybody to remember your Wednesday. Instead of Wednesday, all your wins. Have a spectacular day. Never let anyone dull your sparkle, and never let anyone burst your bubble. Thank you guys for listening. Love you.
Where Mondays mean motivation, and by Wednesday, we're dishing out dazzling advice with a Newsweek twist. This is your go-to spot for embracing the mess, celebrating the successes, and never letting anyone dull your sparkle. Join us for laughs, life lessons, and a whole lot of fun. Fabulously Flawed, where perfect is overrated and every flaw is fabulous.